Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the IGLO Open University 6th session. Today's topic will be about the global burden of disease. Our first presenter for today is Jean Schleiss, Deputy Head of the International Office at Ludwig Maximilians University. Before Jean holds her presentation, let's watch this video together. Jean, please wait because I think we're not live yet.
Okay, but will you present the presentation for me? Yeah. Will you show the slides? Yeah.
Yes, my team will be doing that.
They'll put the presentation up for you. Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yes, but we just noticed that the stream is not live, so I'm not sure what we'll have to do.
Okay. Shall I leave my camera on just now? Or?
Yes. Also, guys, can you please check the chat, which is on the left side, because I will be also communicating there with you guys. Because I think there is a technical issue and we're not live. So okay, Jean, you can start your presentation now.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to my presentation. I'm going to just talk to you and show you some images of LMU Munich and hopefully open your enthusiasm for coming perhaps to study at LMU for a while. Okay, could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, LMU is one of Germany's oldest universities. It was founded in 1472. It's in fact not the very oldest university. That title goes to the University of Heidelberg, but after Heidelberg comes us. We are also one of the largest universities, if not the largest universities when it comes to student population. We currently have over 50,000 students, about 53,000, I think, this semester. We also have 18 faculties, so we are a very large, comprehensive university, and the subject areas that we offer cover a wide spectrum. The only subject areas that we don't really teach are engineering subjects and applied sciences, but apart from that, we've got the whole spectrum there for you. Okay, then I think we can probably move on to the next slide. The LMU is also one of the largest employers in the city of Munich. We have 787 professors and well over 5,000 members of academic staff. The number of people working in administration is also extremely large. In 2019, we offered over 1,000 doctoral we awarded over 1,000 doctoral degrees, and almost 100 postdocs completed what we call the Habilitation. That's something that is common in sort of German-speaking countries like Austria and Switzerland and Germany. When you finish your doctoral degree, you can go on and do this further research work to become a professor in the long run. And as I say, this is something very typical in German-speaking countries. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. LMU is a large university. It's very well known. It's currently Germany's #1 university, so it's ranked first in Germany. And in world rankings, we are also well under the top 100 universities. We are known for our cutting edge research. We are a large research university. Let's move to the next slide. Just to give you an idea of what kind of activities we are involved in the world of research, we obviously are funded by the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. That's the German funding association in Germany for research. And currently we have 13 collaborative research centers, which are funded by the DFG. And we're involved in a further 29 of those. We are also active in the Horizon 2020 program. This is also for EU joint projects within the EU. We are currently involved we have 140 European Research Council grants, which is quite a high number. In fact, again, we are ranked #1 in Germany for the number of ERC grants that we receive, and we're placed 10th in Europe. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, I don't know if you have heard of the German Excellence Initiative. This is a kind of competition in Germany to help universities develop their excellence strategies and become more excellent as a whole. This funding project started in 2006 and continues until today. And LMU has been very successful in all funding lines since the very beginning of this initiative. We currently share 4 clusters of excellence with what we call our sister university in Munich, which is the Technical University of Munich. And on this slide, you can see the areas that we are jointly working together with the Technical University. All in the natural sciences, you will see, either in physics or biology or neurology, astrophysics. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, none of our projects are in the arts, which is a pity because arts are fairly strong at LMU. We're not just a scientific university, but we have a huge faculty of arts and humanities. We are currently being funded also to help us keep up our strategy program and maintain the successful strategy policy pursued by the university. So that's a pretty good thing, and being successful in this competition has done a lot for our international rankings, and we have been very much noticed by the world of international education through our success in this initiative. Okay, can we move on to the next slide? Okay, yeah, again, since 1901, in fact, we've had several Nobel Prize winners at LMU. Obviously 1901 is quite a long way away, but the most recent Nobel Prize winners, 2006, a professor of physics, Professor Theodor Hensch, won a Nobel Prize for physics, and just last year, an honorary professor of LMU, who is actually works at one of the Max Planck Institutes just in the north of Munich, and also a physicist. His area of expertise is he's observing the black hole in physics, and his name is Reinhard Genzel, and he won the Nobel Prize last year. And then there are various other prize winners that we've had at LMU, Leibniz prizes. That's a very high academic honor within Germany. This is awarded to excellent researchers in all disciplines. And we currently have 5 Alexander von Humboldt professorships at LMU, where we invite internationally renowned professors to come and teach at LMU. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about internationalization at LMU. First of all, at our international office, where I've been working for many years, we don't just look after sort of student exchange, but we are also involved in recruiting and enrolling full-time international students at LMU. We currently have 9,100 degree-seeking students at LMU, and we have a large percent of international students. About 18% of the total student population comes from abroad. The largest number of students from one particular country, they are probably Austrian, I would imagine, because those are our closest neighbors. That will be closely followed probably by Italians. But then we've got a very large population of Chinese students, currently about 1,300. Students come to us from China, and we've got over 300 doctoral students at LMU. We are also, apart from our usual mobility network, we also have several strategic partnerships with universities in France, the UK, in Israel, Japan, USA. And we also have strong connections to China. We currently are involved in what we call our CHAN program, which means the China Academic Network. And we work with top Chinese universities on various levels in all areas, scientific areas. We also have various corporations. We have over 40 Chinese doctoral students come to us within the Chinese Scholarship Council program. We work closely with Harvard. We've got a Young Scientist Forum. The main topic of exchange within this forum is in neurosciences. We have just started a Latin America network. We share a campus in Venice with universities worldwide in what we call our Venice International University. We're also members of LERO, which is the League of European Research Universities. And of course, just 2 years ago, we started up in the UGLO network with our partners in Szeged, Paris, Porto, and Lund in Sweden. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our mobility network, because I reckon that's probably what you're most interested in. Obviously, we work with international partners and have over 100 global exchange partnerships up and running. We work in the Erasmus program a lot. We have both exchanges within Europe with all of our European partners. That means our European Union partners, but also countries who are associated to the EU. And we also have projects running within the Erasmus program with partner countries. And our partners are currently in Brazil, Australia, Canada, Israel, Thailand, and Vietnam. Yeah, so as I say, within the Erasmus program, we have over 350 partners in Europe. And with those partners, we have numerous exchange programs, which we are currently renewing. And I reckon altogether, I've never really counted them all, but I reckon we've got about 2,000 individual exchange agreements with our 350 partner universities in Europe. So there are plenty of opportunities for students to go abroad from LFU and also to come into the university to spend a semester or two with us. Within the UGLO project, we had partnerships, in fact, with all of the UGLO partners in the consortium, but the goal is now to increase the mobilities that we have with our UGLO partners. And we've already noticed an increase in numbers of both outgoing and incoming students, and we are actively promoting exchange with our UGLO partners. Okay, perhaps we could move on to the next slide now. Yes, okay, what's it like to study at LMU? This is a picture that you can see on this slide is of our brand new lecture hall in one of our campuses in the west of the city. It's all very high tech, but let's move on to the next slide and I'll tell you a little bit about what you can study at LMU. Well, there's a really wide choice. We have over 300 different degree programs, and we not only have regular bachelor and master programs, but we also have programs which lead to a qualification which we call our state examinations. For example, in teaching, students who want to become teachers do not do a bachelor or master degree at LMU, but study towards a state examination. This is also the case for students studying for professional degrees like in medicine, pharmacy, and also in law. As I said, worldwide, we've probably got about 530 partner universities, including our European partnerships. And just last year, despite Corona, we accepted over 1,000 exchange students, many of those, of course, on virtual exchange because it wasn't possible for them to travel to Munich during the pandemic. But we've just enrolled, well, our semester has just started, this winter semester has just begun, and we are very surprised how many students are actually back on campus. Which is nice to see. So there is some life again, although not all lectures are taking place actually on the premises. A lot will still be taking place online, but at least the students are back in Munich, and that's really good to see. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, Munich University, the University of Munich is not a typical campus university. You can see in the top picture there on that slide that the main building of the university is really bang smack in the center of the city. That wasn't always the case. I think when the main building was built in 1836, the king of the time, the king of Bavaria, he didn't really want the university to be bang smack in the city center. He said, let's put it at the edge of town and keep the rabble of noisy students out on the edge of the city. But in the meantime, Munich has grown quite considerably, and in fact, it's a 4-minute underground ride to the city, to really bang smack city centre, and you can walk in 10 minutes. It's really no distance at all. But the university, as I say, is spread throughout the whole city, and we have various campuses. Perhaps we can move to the next slide. In the city centre, in the main building, we have most of our humanities, the social sciences, economics is just across the road from the main building, as is business administration. Round the corner from the main building, we have our physics faculty, in the library is actually where the international office is, which is just next door. It's adjacent to the main building of the university. And just across the road, we have the Bavarian State Library. So as I say, it's really, really convenient. And most university departments have their own libraries as well. So it's really easy to get around and find the books that you're looking for. So let's move to the next slide. We also have a campus in the southwest of Munich. We call this the campus Großhadern Martinsried. This campus is dedicated to the life sciences and medical sciences. Also in this campus, there are many Max Planck Institutes, like the one for biochemistry, neurobiology, and the Helmholtz Centrum is also nearby. Also in campus, and this is very convenient, we have an innovation and startup center for biotechnology, and the BioM is there to promote technology transfer. So it's really handy to have all these things in close vicinity to the campus and the natural sciences that we have there, because the life sciences are becoming very interdisciplinary, and it's really, really convenient to have Max Planck and co right next door to us there. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, as I say, Munich is a city, it's what we call a sort of international city, but it has a heart to it. It's a large city, but it's got a kind of village feel to it. Like on the slide, if it's a good day, you can actually see the way to the Alps from some of the higher points in the city. If you climb some of the church towers, you get a really magnificent view over the city, and you can see right down to the Alps. Perhaps we can move to the next slide. Yeah, as I say, the city has got excellent facilities for both academics and students alike. But the city's got much more to offer, especially to exchange students. It's not all about going to lectures and working on your projects and sitting in the library and reading books. Munich is there to be explored, and in all seasons, it's a wonderful city to live in. Just opposite the university, we have a magnificent park. It's absolutely huge. It's called the English Garden because it was built on the English landscape parks of the time. And in the summer, it's just an area for students to go out and enjoy. You'll find students all over the park. You know, they can be sitting in the shade under a tree, reading books or whatever, or enjoying many of the activities that you can do in the park, like swimming in the canals that lead off from the river that runs through the city. You can actually surf, which sounds quite unusual, but quite attractive for some of our Australian exchange students to come over with their surfboards and find out that they can actually do it in the middle of the park in Munich. There's a really impressive wave. There are beer gardens galore, so in summertime it's really nice to go out and enjoy a drink and with your friends, and it's a really relaxed atmosphere. You can go to a beer garden, buy a drink, but you can take along your own picnic. So it's a really inexpensive night out with your friends and fellow students. The city itself is full of internationally renowned museums. There are theatres, opera houses. So it really is a major European cultural centre. And of course, close by, we have the Alps. And before you get to the Alps, there are a multitude of lakes. The scenery around Munich is absolutely a delight. You might have detected from my accent that I am actually not German myself. I actually come from Scotland, but as I say, living here is absolutely amazing. I can really vouch for that there are so many activities that make it so nice and pleasant to spend time in and around the city. We're also based bang smack in the center of Europe, which is really great because it makes travel to other countries really easy. I mean, you can get on a train and the next morning you can be in Venice if you leave on the night train, and you know, it's like 2 hours to go to Salzburg by train, faster if you go down on the motorway by car. Well, if there's no congestion, but normally you can do it in much less time than that. You know, to go climbing in the Alps in the summer or skiing in the Alps in the winter, you can get to the closest areas within an hour. It's really, really handy. France is not far away. Poland's not far away. I mean, Czechoslovakia, well, the Czech Republic is not far away, and even Hungary is not far away. So as I say, we're really close to all of our neighbours round about, which makes it also a very exciting destination for students who come to us on exchange. Okay, I think that was probably my presentation. I think that's probably our last slide. Yes, it is. So I thank you for listening. I hope I've been able to make LMU an interesting destination for you, and hope very much to see some of you with us in the future. Good night.
Thank you, Jean, for your presentation. I would like to encourage students to drop their questions in the YouTube question section. And if you have any questions, we will address them at the last part of today's session. And please leave your questions there and we will answer them. Up next, I would like to give the floor to Ashley Haberman-Lawson, Outreach Manager for UGLO and Model Coordinator for Introduction to Global Health from the Ludwig Maximilians University. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to our UGLO Introduction to Global Health course. It's a complementary course to the Open University. It's an e-learning course, and I just want to give you a brief overview of what it is. So it's intended as a blended learning course, so there are 2 synchronous sessions and then the rest is e-learning. And our aim is to give you a basic understanding of what global health is. So the format is 2 synchronous sessions. So the first one will start next week on Tuesday at 4 p.m. And this will give students an introduction to the course and to the group tasks, which they will work on throughout the course. And then on the last session, they'll present the group work. There are 8 units of interactive e-learning, so we want to make it as interactive as possible. So there are quizzes throughout, there are interactive videos where you can interact with the video, and this will go on for an hour and a half per week for 12 weeks. So I also wanted to give you a sneak peek into what the course looks like. So I will just show you some of our courses that we have, some of the interactive elements that we have in our course. So one of the elements we have is a branching scenario. This is basically students choose which way they're through the course. So for this one, we've got 2 different settings. So one is a country in a middle income country with a national health plan. And then the other is a high income country with a private-based healthcare plan. And based on your responses, you get different pathways. So we can just have a quick look and see. So you get a bit of information about what the scenario is, and then you get asked a question about it, and you get videos throughout showing you and introducing you to different things. Then you have different choices to make. And then the videos play. And if you make a bad choice, you might end up with a hospital outbreak, which is not so good. So it depends on your choices as to how the scenario ends. At the end of each unit, we also have a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire quiz. And based on your answers, you get different things.
Welcome to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where we will test your knowledge on global health. There are 15 rounds, each round varying in terms of difficulty and money reward. Are you ready?
So you get a question. I won't go through all of them.
I'm afraid that's the wrong answer. You leave with nothing.
And obviously we want you to get the right answers, but you can have another try at it. So this is just a brief introduction to the course. We have a limited number of places available still. The registration ends on Friday, so if you want to take the course, please register by then. You can find out more and how to register on our website here. And if you have any questions, please email me. This is my email address. And of course, follow us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's it for my presentation. I hope you had a nice introduction to the course, and I hope you take it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for your presentation. So I would like to encourage students again to drop their questions in the comment box. And now our last presentation for today is held by Professor Katja Bradan, Professor of Epidemiology and Chairwoman of the Center for International Health at LMU Munich. This video is pre-recorded and we will start watching it now.
Hello, a very warm welcome to this online class within the Szeged Open University. Today we are going to talk about the global burden of disease. My name is Katja Bradan. I am a professor for epidemiology at the Hospital of the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, Germany. Since 2014 I am also chairwoman of the Center for International Health of this university. My focus is empowering health professionals in Latin America. Due to my interest for global health, I was invited to be the academic leader of EUGLOH at LMU. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here today. Unfortunately, I do not have any superpower. But I am happy to explain you something about the global burden of disease and how it is studied. During the next hour we will learn why it might be useful to measure the global burden of disease, how it is measured in the Global Burden of Disease study, and finally, we will see some results and applications. Enjoy! Let's start.
Hello, a very warm welcome to this session of the Szeged Open University on the global burden of disease. Let's start with why measuring the disease burden, why measuring health. So for this, we travel to Paris and meet an international group of diverse background, all related to public health, or most of them at least related to public health. They have a meeting, and this is organized by the UGLO office in Paris. It's called Health Knowledge Café. And this is one of the outreach activities of UGLO at this university. So the meeting is hosted by Joachim. He is a global burden disease expert from Lund University, so one of the UGLO partner universities. Coming to the meeting is Zoltan, because he has some questions for Joachim. He is a 44-year-old officer at a local health department in Szeged, Hungary. He studied at Szeged University and is member of an exchange program with Paris Health Office. Today, he wants to understand whether overall health in Hungary actually improved after 1990, and if so, what contributed to the improvement. With him, there is François, who is working with Zoltan. He is a 55-year-old health officer in Paris. Since a few days, he is responsible for advising colleagues from French-speaking African countries. Recently, he was called by Dr. Okunde from Benin. Dr. Okunde urgently needs advice. The new health minister of his country has asked him to make a plan on how to allocate national resources for health. His idea is to simply copy the French approach. There's also Tanya. Tanya is a 28-year-old epidemiologist working at the German Robert Koch Institute in Berlin. She graduated from LMU Munich. Tanya was asked to tell the German government whether COVID-19 is a real burden to the German society. She loves visiting Paris, where she once was an exchange student a few years ago. Here, she feels that this is her best place to think hard. With her, there is Denise. Denise is Tanya's grandmother from Porto in Portugal. She's visiting her granddaughter. Recently, her husband, João, died from lung cancer at the age of 70 after having smoked 2 pack years a day over 40 years. She's asking herself how many premature deaths in the world are due to smoking. So let's have a closer look at the question of our team. Zoltan, he basically is asking, did health in Hungary improve due to the political changes since 1990? François and Okunde asked, should health expenses be allocated the same way across countries? Tanya, the German epidemiologist, is asking, what's the burden of COVID-19 to the German society? Then there is Denise, who is asking, what's the proportion of premature death due to smoking? So all these questions are around measuring health. Basically, when we want to measure health, we could have several purposes, and here is a better ordering on how and why measuring health. In this graph, which I borrowed from Eva Refus, a colleague from the Public Health Department at LMU University. So we could measure health to evaluate time trends of diseases and death. This could serve for early warnings, but we could also use it to see whether interventions work. Then measuring health is also useful to assess spatial patterns of disease and mortality, to identify hotspots, to do comparisons between countries, and to evaluate who is at risk. Then we could also use measuring health for action on the causes of diseases, to prioritize health expenses, but also to inform governments, the public, and other stakeholders. So how could we sort the questions asked by our team in Paris to these fields of measuring health? Remember Zoltan, he is interested in, did health in Hungary improve due to political changes since 1990? So actually, he wants to see time trends. Then François and Okunde, they ask, should health expenses be allocated the same way across countries? And here we are in the spatial patterns part of measuring, evaluating health across the world. It's Tanya. She's not asking spatial patterns across countries, but her question is, what's the burden of COVID-19 to the German society? And this she is asked by politicians. So actually, she is at the action part of assessing health. And finally, Denise wants to know what's the proportion of premature death due to smoking. There she is asking about the causes, and also here this is in the action field of why measuring health or why measuring disease burden. So now we know that we should measure health, and why we should measure health, why we should measure the burden of disease, for which fields this might serve, and that there is a broad range of why measuring burden of disease. But how to do that? Well, for this, we need numbers. We need good numbers. And this starts with something as basic as population size. Because only if we know how many people at what age live in a certain country, in a certain region, by sex, then we can base our estimates upon something and can do comparable estimates of the burden of disease. And this is not that easy as it sounds. While some countries have very good population registries, and Germany, Sweden are examples of this, in others, this is difficult. And for example, in the US, people have, or researchers have to rely on census data. Then, or even estimates taken from household surveys and other surveys from which we need to do estimations. So many of this, we don't have good numbers, we need to estimate. We also need to know the life expectancy by year, age group, sex, and country. We need to know the number of deaths. And now imagine a country where it is really complicated, bureaucratic thing to register death. Maybe not every death is registered, as not every birth might be registered. Just imagine being in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and you have to walk to the next village where you could register death a couple of days. Then you might not go there, or just might go there once a year and do this. And then we not only need death, but we also need reliable information on causes of death. Why did people die? To really estimate how to allocate resources and how to know what's the burden of a specific disease which leads to death. Then finally, maybe the most complicated thing is we need measures of disease, and we need standard classification of disease, and we need doctors to classify the diseases in a unique way across countries. So this is not easy. And where we don't have this information, as said, we need models. And this makes the whole story of the burden of disease so complicated and hard to believe for some people. So we start with collection of data based on routine and non-routine data collection activities. These include the census, health facility records, civil registration, resource records, population surveys, and monitoring by other sectors. They need to be combined, data need to be extracted and analyzed, and then we can come up with numbers. And the numbers need to be of high quality. So a couple of years ago, there was this article in Science, how do you count the dead? Scientists agree they need better estimates for the death toll from the world's major killers, but they firstly disagree on how to go about it. So here you see there is disagreement about it, but still it's important, everyone agrees upon that we need numbers, good numbers to estimate health, to estimate the burden of disease. Just think about the simple population size and how to determine it across countries. I already mentioned this example. In some countries, relatively complete population registers exist, like in Germany, but Sweden really is one of the examples on population registers, even including detailed data on health. Now think about the US. There is no complete registration, as registration is not obligatory, so they rely on census. I also mentioned this before. In other countries, it's sometimes very bureaucratic to register a birth or death, or it's just too complicated to get to the next registration office, to the next village. So household surveys are done to overcome these challenges. War or disaster might change population size rapidly in a situation in which keeping track is not easy. Therefore, coming up with comparable and reliable numbers on population size across the world is not an easy task, and models have to be applied taking into account uncertainty. It's getting even more complicated when we talk about non-fatal diseases. Here we see the availability of data across regions and time for the three major groups of diseases considered in the global burden of disease study. Communicable diseases, including maternal, neonatal, and nutritional diseases, here in the red dots, then non-communicable or chronic diseases in the blue dots, and injuries. And you see the more dots we have, it's by year and by region across the world. The more dots you see, the more complete information we have, the more data are there. And you see, for example, for injury, it's much less data than, for example, for group 1 diseases, for communicable diseases, including maternal, neonatal, and nutritional diseases. So to get these numbers, to estimate the global burden of disease, to understand what's going on, how is the health status in one country, in one region, and around the world. This is done for the global burden of disease study since 1990. Based at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, which is an independent global health research center at the University of Washington. A couple of hundred researchers from more than 140 countries contribute to this global burden of disease study, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Its principal investigator is Chris Murray. So this is what we are going to talk about. This is the result of clever thinking, of seeing the need for estimating the global burden of disease and coming up also with complex models. So what does the global burden of disease take into account as it is done at the moment? How does it estimate the global burden of disease? And for this, I would like to invite you to watch a video by the German Robert Koch Institute, which, from my point of view, explains very well how the global burden of disease is assessed. And let's start with the first part, which is the numbers of years of life lost. So the numbers of years of life lost. So enjoy watching.
Burden of disease is a concept that describes the health state of a population. It deals with the number of life years in Germany that are lost due to death, disease, and other health-related impairments. These indicators can be used to compare the impact of specific diseases on the health of a population and to depict it for different regions. The leading indicator used to measure the burden of disease is DALY. DALY is composed of two parts: the number of years of life lost due to disease and death. One DALY equals the loss of 1 year. Let's look at one example. Most of the residents at 20 Maple Street are healthy. Then Max dies after a stroke at the age of 75. He thus dies 11 years earlier than the statistical life expectancy at his age indicates.
So, well, this was the easier part, mortality. As everybody has to die sooner or later, instead of measuring just mortality, number of deaths due to a disease in a given population in a given time, it counts premature deaths. The years of life lost count premature death. This is it. It answers the question, how many years earlier people die due to a given disease. Let's see how this may help our group in Paris. Today, the session is chaired by Joachim, as you know, the expert on global burden of disease from Lund University in Sweden. And we remember Tanya. She wants to know how many years of life were lost in 2020 in Germany due to COVID-19. Using the methodology of the global burden of disease study, she came up with an estimate which she is presenting to the group. Let's focus on the bars. The bar chart shows the years of life lost in 2020 due to COVID-19 in Germany. It gives estimates for men, these are the darker bars here, and women, the lighter bars, by age group. So here under 10 and here over 90. We see that the overall burden of death was larger in men, the darker columns, than in women. We also see that it's highest in the age group 80 to 89. You may ask yourself, why is it lower in the age group 90 plus years? This is because A, the proportion of the German population is much lower than the other age group. In this age group, we just have less population in Germany. And because the number of years each person died earlier due to COVID-19 is lower than in the younger age group. On average, Tanya tells the group, a person who died of COVID-19 lost 10 years of life due to the disease. In the younger age group, mortality due to COVID-19 was lower and therefore years of life lost lower. However, the mean number of years lost due to the disease in a person younger than 70 years was 25 years and thus much higher than in older people. So on average, persons who died of COVID-19 lost a mean of 10 years of life. Quite impressive when you report this to politicians, but also to the general public. So Tanya didn't stop here. She went on and also compared the daily toll of COVID-19 in 2020 to the daily average toll of the most common chronic diseases and lower respiratory infections. So here in the graph we see ischemic heart disease, an estimate for 2017 because she didn't have newer data, then lung cancer also for 2017, stroke same year, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, colon cancer. These are the most common chronic diseases, and then lower respiratory infections, as this is similar in symptoms to COVID-19. For this comparison, as said, only data for 2017 were available. We see fluctuation of COVID-19 deaths over the year, here going up during the first wave and going through far more up during the second wave. So number of deaths was depending on the time of the year, with highest years of life lost in December during the second wave, as we see here. And before vaccination had started in the elderly, which was around the end of the year 2020. But for the other chronic diseases, we do not assume a temporal variation in years of life lost. So during the last weeks of the year 2020, the number of years of life lost due to COVID-19 was the highest among the diseases on the study. You see here up, it was end of December, even higher than ischemic heart disease. However, if you look on the mean level, and this is the blue line here, down here, years of life lost due to the most common chronic diseases were still higher in 2020 than for COVID-19. But COVID-19 exceeded the years of life lost due to lower respiratory infection. The little group is asking themselves now whether the years of life lost due to COVID-19 differs in their country. Tanya already had a look at the literature, but couldn't find similar estimates for France, Portugal, Hungary. Joachim said, well, this depends on the proportion of the elderly in the population. It also depends on the proportion of the population vulnerable to severe COVID-19, so more prone to die due to COVID-19. He therefore shows them a paper which was recently published on the population vulnerability to COVID-19 in Europe. So this is the paper Joachim is showing them. It's the link you find here below, and it's showing a graph from this paper The x-axis shows percentage of elderly population defined as persons 70 years and older. The y-axis gives an indicator for the burden of health conditions which make people vulnerable to COVID-19. These include chronic respiratory conditions, cardiovascular conditions, diabetes, etc. The group of 5 identify their countries on the graph. So Portugal is high up in the proportion of elderly population and risk diseases for COVID-19. So Portugal, in this comparison of European countries, is highest up of the 5 countries they look at. Sweden and Germany. Germany has a similar proportion of population 70 years and older, but rank a little lower, just a little, in diseases, making the population vulnerable to COVID-19. Hungary, in contrast, has the lowest proportion of the elderly among the 5 countries, 13%, but it's highest in diseases, making people vulnerable to severe COVID-19. France is lowest in such diseases and only has a little higher proportion of population above the age of 70, around 14%, 13.5% to be exact. So compared to the other UCLO partner countries, it's best off. So this is what Tanya found out. Now we come to the question of Zoltan. Zoltan also studied the whole day. He checked the internet for results of the Global Burden of Disease study and found the possibility to visualize the results. He's presenting his results to the group. The arrow diagram ranks the years of life lost for the year 1990 and 2019 by diseases. As mentioned before, the Global Burden of Disease study uses 3 broader groups of diseases: communicable, maternal, neonatal, and nutritional diseases. These are color-coded in orange in this graph. Non-communicable diseases are presented in blue and injuries in green. Zoltan is impressed that the 3 disease groups with the highest ranks in 1990 stayed the same until 2019. So if you look here, it's cardiovascular diseases ranks first in years life lost in Hungary for both sexes and all ages together. Second are cancers, and third, digestive diseases. This means that in this country, still the highest number of years of life lost can be attributed to cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and digestive disease. However, it seems that 3 groups of injuries went markedly down. So if you look here, self-harm, violence, unintentional injury, and transport injuries, they went down from 1990 rank here on the left-hand side to rank 7, 8, 9 in 2019. So he thinks about which measures could have led to, for example, less transport injuries leading to death. Also, years of life lost due to maternal and neonatal death went down in ranks, even more pronounced. So the orange one here, from rank 8 to rank 13. But chronic respiratory diseases went up. So he's asking himself whether smoking could be an issue. Also, diabetes and neurological disorders were higher ranked in 2019 than in 1990. He's concerned about that and thinks what he could tell also back in Hungary when advising the health office. Joachim is challenging him by asking, but is this really bad? It shows us that mortality shifted to chronic diseases of the elderly, a pattern comparable to other high-income countries. So Joachim is showing them a map of the years of life lost around the world. Results are age standardized to take differences in age distribution across countries into account. On the upper map, we see the classical disease group of communicable diseases, including maternal, neonatal death, and death of malnutrition. In this figure, we can see that the burden of years of life lost is centered mainly in African countries. Here, it's color-coded in red, so blue are the lowest years of life lost due to non-communicable disease, and red, the highest burden. In contrast, here in the lower panel, the burden of years of life lost due to non-communicable diseases like cancer, cardiovascular diseases, etc., is more evenly distributed, but still lowest in high-income countries. Again, here the darker blue coloring. We have to take into account the regions, where the upper scale here ranges to 48K, while the lower just ranges to 36K. So this we have to keep in mind. So the burden overall is not the same, but we see that the distribution also is very different. Now changing the upper figure to injuries, which overall are nowadays less important in terms of total years of life lost, we see a somehow different picture with highest numbers in countries with conflict, as Afghanistan, and countries with a high rate of suicide, like Greenland. Now, François is awakening. Looking at these maps, wouldn't it be possible to have a closer look at Benin and France? Joachim suggests to look at the arrow diagrams again. As the population of France is much larger than that of Benin, they look at the annual rate per 100,000. Annual rate of years of life lost. Here in the upper part for France, in the lower for Benin, both sexes, all ages. Looking at the color difference in the chart for France and the one for Benin is quite impressive. While the traditional health problems are still high up, with neglected tropical diseases and malaria even increasing from 1990 to 2090, in Benin, in France, only injuries and non-communicable disease are high up on the list. Yeah, we see no infectious disease here up for France. The biggest success since 1990 in Benin is a reduction in number of years of life lost due to malnutrition, while in France, the biggest success story seems to be a lowering rank of transport injuries, which ranked 5 in 1990 and 11 in 2019. So his doubts of his colleague's idea, so the doubts of François, of his colleague's idea to just copy the way to allocate health expenditures is even increasing. But then he has a question to the group. Not all diseases lead to death. What about someone who, after a traffic accident at age 20 years, is suffering from paraplegia, Denise agrees and tells them, I'm suffering from hearing impairments in 10 years. I will not die from it, but still my life is not as good as it could be. So Joachim suggests to watch the second part of the video by the German Robert Koch Institute, which we will do in a second.
Anna suffers from depression and loses 0.25 years, a quarter of a year, as a result of the length and severity of this health-related impairment. The burden of disease at 20 Maple Street therefore adds up to 11.25 DALY. If this method is applied to the entire country, the burden of disease in Germany amounts to more than 25 million DALY for 1 year. Risk factors often play an important role in the development of diseases. Well-known risks are the consumption of alcohol, smoking, as well as hypertension and obesity. The environment can also pose a threat to our health, for example, through fine particulate matter or noise. The so-called risk attribution is used to determine the degree to which individual risks contribute to the burden of disease and helps to identify the need for action to improve our health over the long run. The results of the German Burden of Disease study are available to the general public. They provide information about which diseases result in high losses of life years, which age groups are most affected, and which risk factors play a key role. Researchers and decision makers in public health and politics can assess these aspects, identify health needs, and thus plan healthcare and prevention measures more systematically.
So with this, we have a second measure of burden of disease. Years of life lost due to life with disability, or YLDs. Coming back to the example of François and Denise. François mentioned someone who suffered paraplegia at age 20 years and lived 60 years with this disability. We need to weight these 60 years with the severity of the disease. On a scale from 0, which would be perfect health, to 1, which would be equivalent to death, paraplegia was set to 0.57, taking mobility, self-care, pain, discomfort, cognition, interpersonal activities, vision, sleep and energy, and effect into account. The weights come from survey. So for the person with paraplegia who lived 40 years with the disease, his years of life lost due to life with disability would be 60 times 0.57 or 34.2 years. In contrast, for Denise, if she was completely deaf for each year lived with deafness, the year would count for 0.17 years of life lost due to life with disability. So here we have to again multiply the number of years lived with deafness with this factor, and then we come up with the years of life lost due to disability. So to come up with an overall estimate of burden of disease, one simply adds up the years lived with disability, which before has been weighted by the severity of disease, and the years of life lost due to premature death. This then is called DALY, or disability adjusted life years, which is a measure of overall disease burden. When François is now applying this measure to compare France, here in the upper panel, to Benin in the lower panel, one can see that group 1 diseases which is communicable disease, mother and child mortality, malnutrition, still is by far the largest burden of disease in Benin, here marked in blue. It accounts for around 64% of all disability-adjusted life years or daily in the country. While the smallest burden of disease of the three disease groups in France, with only around 4%. So group 1 disease, orange. Sorry, I said blue before. So it's orange are the group 1 diseases, the communicable diseases. The darkness of each color indicates the magnitude of change since 1990. This tells us that although group 1 diseases are still the largest burden of disease in Benin, they are decreasing by around 3% annually. The figure also tells for scientist colleagues in Benin that it's not a good idea to copy healthcare systems or interventions from France simply to Benin. For example, training programs for specialists in infectious diseases might be a better investment in Benin than in France. Looking at the world map illustrating the proportion of years lived with disability of deaths by countries, one can see that premature death still has a major toll, up to more than 90% in African countries, while in high-income countries, it only accounts for about half of the deaths. Here, chronic diseases, non-communicable diseases, at least not immediately leading to death, have a high importance. However, these diseases are also on the rise in middle and low-income countries, resulting in a double burden of disease, classical group 1 diseases and non-communicable diseases in these low and middle-income countries. Denise is impressed by what she learned so far, but now she wants to know how risk factors come into play. We already heard a little bit about that in the video. She reminds the group that she is curious to know the years of life lost due to smoking. And after having learned that deaths exist, she asks whether one could calculate the deaths due to tobacco smoking. Joachim explains that this is called comparative risk assessment and starts another video.
Is air pollution bad for human health? Yes, of course it is. Everybody knows that. But to what extent does air pollution harm population health? Finding an answer to this question is not as simple as to the first one. In this video, we will demonstrate a scientific method that can help us to find an answer. This method is called environmental burden of disease. To apply this method, we first need to know the concentration of pollutants in the air, such as the concentration of particulate matter or nitrogen dioxide. The higher the concentration of the pollutants, the more we inhale. The pollutants we inhale can damage the cells in our lungs and harm their function. Some pollutants are so small that they can even pass through the lungs and get into our blood, causing damage to the cells of our cardiovascular system. These processes can lead to severe diseases like asthma, lung cancer, cardiovascular diseases, or even death. Next, we will select one of these diseases, lung cancer, and calculate how many healthy life years were lost due to this medical condition in Germany in the year 2009. For this, we will use the following formula. The YLLs, which represent mortality by counting the years lost due to premature death caused by the selected disease are added to the YLDs, which represent morbidity by counting years lived with the selected disease. The sum of these years results in the so-called DALYs, the disability adjusted life years. A DALY represents a lost healthy life year. And what does this mean in detail? YLL stands for years of life lost due to premature mortality. These are the years lost if a person dies before reaching an average life expectancy. For a person living in Germany, the life expectancy is on average 81 years. If a person dies due to lung cancer before reaching this age, for example at age 50, she or he loses 31 life years. The YLLs are estimated for all deceased people at a certain age. So if 400 people die at the age of 50 due to lung cancer, we multiply 400 people by 31 years, which results in 12,400 life years lost. Then, at the age of 51, 415 people die from lung cancer, resulting in 12,450 YLLs. We repeat this calculation for all people who died in 2009 due to lung cancer, and finally add these values up. For Germany, this adds up to about 649,300 life years lost due to lung cancer. These are the YLLs. Let's go back to the formula and look at the second part of the DALYs, the YLDs. These stand for years lived with disability. As we do not live in full health throughout our entire lives, the YLDs represent the years lived with health restrictions. Let's see how to calculate the YLDs. First, we need to know how many people suffered from lung cancer in the year 2009. In Germany, this were 30,662 people. Unlike mortality, the years lived with a disease are not counted as a full loss of life years. Diseases vary in their impact on health. Therefore, the years lived with a disease are multiplied with a factor that represents the severity of that disease. Every disease has its own weighting factor, called disability weight. Disability weights are anchored on a scale between 0 and 1. 0 stands for full health, and 1 is a state comparable to death. Years of life lost due to premature death are therefore weighted at 1, and years lived with a disability are weighted with a value below 1. For example, treated asthma has a disability weight of 0.02 and is not as severe as lung cancer, which has a disability weight of 0.29. With these numbers, we are able to quantify the YLDs. The number of people suffering from lung cancer in Germany in 2009, 30,662, is multiplied by the disability weight for lung cancer, 0.29, resulting in about 8,900 YLDs. Adding YLDs and YLLs together yields DALYs, the number of lost healthy life years. This means that in Germany, nearly 658,200 life years were lost in 2009 due to lung cancer. But not all of these DALYs are attributable to air pollution. We know that smoking and asbestos can cause lung cancer. There are also further currently unknown causes of lung cancer. In order to find the share attributable to air pollution, broad studies across a population are conducted. These assessments are so-called epidemiological studies. In our example, people who are exposed to higher concentrations of the air pollutant particulate matter are compared to people who are exposed to lower concentrations. In these studies, the number of people who develop lung cancer are observed. Based on these statistics, we can quantify the risk for developing lung cancer when a certain concentration of particulate matter is in the air. Together with the information about how many people in Germany are exposed to these concentrations, we can quantify what percentage of the DALYs are attributable to particulate matter. For lung cancer, this accounts for about 19% of the lost healthy life years. This percentage is multiplied with the DALYs estimated for lung cancer, which then shows that in Germany in 2009, 125,100 DALYs were lost due to lung cancer resulting from air pollution. So we found an answer to the question, to what extent air pollution harms population health, and can see that air pollution is a considerable threat to population health. By using this method, not only can the effects of air pollution on health be quantified, the impact of noise or mold can also be quantified and compared to each other. Likewise, the burden of disease due to behavioral risk factors such as unhealthy diets or smoking can be quantified. The DALYs enable comparisons of different diseases and risk factors by using one measurement unit that combines mortality and morbidity effects. Furthermore, the changes of the disease burden over a period of time can be assessed. This information can be used to support political decision-making. For example, it can be used to quantify how policy decisions like financial support for electric vehicles or investing in cycling-friendly cities impact population health.
So after Joachim showed this, Denise is quite impressed. As well, she found this was a very good summary of what she learned this afternoon, but in the same way it explained very well to her, gave her an idea how what she's interested in, which is how much contributes smoking to the burden of disease, could be assessed. The group is looking at more global maps of disease. The first one shown here shows the proportion of all deaths in 2019 attributed to smoking on a global scale. The proportion ranged from 1%, dark blue mainly in African countries, to 26% in Greenland. For Portugal, it's 10%. Denise is quite surprised that it's lower in her country than in the other UGLO countries. And Zoltan is upset that it's estimated to be as high as 15% in Hungary. So then we look at the proportion of DALYs attributable to smoking, and here the difference between Portugal and Hungary became even more pronounced, 10% in Portugal and 18% in Hungary and other countries in the region. So Zoltan asks for the same map of DALYs, but for 1990. Interestingly, at this time, the proportion of DALYs attributed to smoking was 19% in his country, so only slightly higher than today. This might be something to report to the health authorities and to discuss preventive measures with them, he thinks. So what does the group take home from Paris with this? Well, they understood that the burden of disease analysis is a framework for estimating levels of population health and causes of population mortality and morbidity. It might help to allocate resources and plan interventions carefully. However, they learned that it needs good data and that there also is a lot of modeling behind it, which is not easy to understand. So it's not perfect, but it's an approximation which might help, especially policymakers. So if this made you interested in the topic and all other topics around global health, I would like to invite you to the UGLO online global health course, which will start next week with a synchronous session and continuing later on with asynchronous sessions and close up with project presentations of you, the participants. And I would also like to invite you to reading a recent book called Epic Measures, 1 Doctor, 7 Billion Patients, which tells a little bit about the history of the global burden of disease study and also of its PIs. So with this, I would like to thank you a lot for your attention and look forward to your questions. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
We would like to thank Professor Katja Redden for her presentation, which was very fruitful and engaging. And since this was our last presentation for today, we would like to encourage students to drop their questions in the YouTube chat box, and we will make sure to answer them. So if you have any questions regarding one of the presentations that you just watched today, please drop your questions in the chat section. Okay, so we have received a question, and it's directed to Jean. And someone is asking if there are any programs for dentistry in LMU University.
Yes, we do have programs. We have dentistry at LMU. The only problem with dentistry courses is that the capacity is pretty limited. That means that we don't have that many exchange programs in dentistry just because there aren't so many places for students to take up electives in clinics. But as I say, that's something we can look into. I know at the moment, because of the pandemic, that the dentistry department wasn't taking any exchange students at all on board, but that might change.
Thank you for your answer. Okay, so I think that was the only question that we have received. I would like to thank all our speakers for their presentation today. It was really fruitful and engaging. Thank you all for your presentation, and thanks for all of those who were watching us today. Don't forget to join us next Wednesday for the 7th session of the IGLO Open University, and we wish you all a nice evening.